Hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar with our friends of Toggle. We have RJ here, frequent webinar speaker in Peeptrade. We're always happy to have you, RJ. And I cannot wait for the new release that you just talked about.
Well, thanks, Juan, and it's a pleasure to be here. You know, it's always fun to sort of talk with everyone and you know work through the platform. I know that we've done a few recent ones more on sort of subject matter specific things like technical analysis and stuff like that. And so Giuseppe, he speaks Spanish, so unfortunately I don't, but hopefully it won't be. Hopefully it won't be too bad. And it's great to chat with you, Juan. Great to show everyone the platform. And I think, really the education component is something we're really excited about. We're going to be building out more education stuff and continue to partner with you guys on helping the next generation of sort of financiers understand markets, have the right tools, and sort of go through all of that fun stuff. So should I just jump right in?
Yeah, you have the rights to share your screen. Perfect. Now.
So for those of you who haven't joined one of these before, or apologies for those of you who have, so Toggle, we essentially use large-scale compute and machine learning to look at the vast universe of data around us, distilling it down into what do I need to know, right? For the names I hold in my portfolio, for the names in my watch list, how are data changes moving and how has that historically impacted my names? And so we're looking at millions of time series every night across 13,000 assets globally. And it's all distilled down into sort of newsfeed that you might get just about anywhere. So you scroll through, you see, oh, hey, Square momentum turned negative 88% of the time. This led to a decrease in price. And so Toggle, the machine, is essentially working on your behalf as a junior analyst, as many of you might become. And what it does is it sort of looks at all these dimensions and then goes through all the statistical analysis. And so what does that mean? We can walk right in. So the first thing it tells you, hey, momentum turned negative. Typically, this is bearish for the name. It gives a little bit of an intro paragraph. Hey, this took place 5 times in the past, most recently on 8/20, and this insight received 5 out of 8 stars, and we'll go into the stars later. But the first thing you'll see that's relatively meaningful is it's a recent price chart, and then it shows you a bunch of boxes highlighted, as well as the sort of lines to give you a sense of where is this pattern working and where isn't it working. And in this case, we can see this most recent episode was triggered on the 27th of August, and it says, hey, you know what? Typically over the next 2 weeks, Square is down 15%, give or take, based off of the prior time we've seen momentum in this configuration. Toggle underneath the hood is actually doing all sorts of optimizations on your behalf. So it's looking not just at this 2-week horizon it's highlighted, but all horizons from 1 week to 6 months, and really digs in to say, where's the optimal hit ratio? What does that range of outcomes look like? What does the median return look like? Things like that. But the next thing is it'll tell you, when has this happened before? So yes, this most recently happened on the 27th of August, but when else do I know that we've had that sort of negative momentum pattern that it highlighted? So we can see at the end of 2017, we had it, sort of beginning of 2018, and then most recently towards the end of 2018, and then we haven't really seen it until very recently. And what is that based off of? It's based off of 1 week momentum turning negative, and at the same time having relatively strong 6-month momentum. And so the confluence of those two factors is why it's selecting, hey, here's when this has happened before, and here, and typically that's been bearish the name. Now, going back to the first thing mentioned, which was the stars, Toggle will only write an article if it's deemed to be statistically robust enough. And each of these is sort of outlined here in the middle, where it'll tell you, when has this happened before, right? We've been through sort of when has this happened before and what does that look like, but it judges the criteria on a number of dimensions. How frequently has this happened in the past? How asymmetric is the return profile? Does the return profile have drawdowns, or is it typically a pretty smooth path for you to make money on this bearish pattern? How accurate has it been? Right, what has the historical hit rate been in sample versus out of sample? Does this occur relatively frequently? All of these things it takes into account, sort of lays out for you nicely as to how robust is this insight that Toggle is bringing to you, and why might you want to look at it? I'll go back to the feed, but this sort of framework holds across everything, right? Those 13,000 assets. And if you were to search for something like theme, you'll see sentiment, momentum, geopolitics, valuation, positioning, fundamentals, right? All of these different dimensions are looked at for every single name in the Toggle universe every day. And each of those insights is tested in those robust manners across these different drivers, and they're only published if there's something here that's of interest. And so you might say, you know what, I'm interested in technology. So you can say, hey, show me anything that's in the tech sector. And so you can start to filter. It'll show you, hey, here are some bullish patterns, here's some bearish patterns. Momentum turned positive, momentum turned negative, the one we were just looking at. See changes at a recent low. But the important thing is that Toggle is doing this automatically for you every night across this vast universe of names. Now, the newest feature, and this is, I think, what you'll be excited about, Juan, is that if you now search for a single name asset, we actually bring you what we describe as an asset overview. So now it's not just filtering the feed on this name, you're actually getting a line plot. You're getting a sense of a number of overviews of different dimensions. So how's growth versus its sort of last 5 years, right? How do revisions look versus its last 5 years, positive, negative? Price level, right? Tesla's at sort of all-time highs, and so obviously you're at a very extended level there. And actually on many metrics, it looks like it's relatively extended. But on the left side, the really cool thing is that each of these is hoverable, so you can see, is it based off seasonality? Is it based off of analyst revisions? Is it based off of valuation? Any number of things like that, and it actually shows you, when did Toggle find a pattern, and what was that pattern? So if you click in and sort of scroll down, it'll filter. Hey, that's what I was just looking at, was that July 9th pattern of analyst revisions where analysts turned negative on Tesla, and that was actually bullish the name. And obviously we can see from the chart, hey, Tesla has sort of gone bananas over the last month or so, 2 months. But this overview widget is both in the searching, right? Whether you're searching for an FX cross or any number of things like that, or if you connect a portfolio, it's also there. So when you connect a portfolio, Toggle's idea was to look at all of those dimensions and really summarize for you across your names. Now, this portfolio I have connected here really only has one holding, which is Amazon. We can see there was a bullish pattern in Amazon recently, but if you click into the different names, you can similarly get those sort of overviews of where do we stand in terms of the fundamentals. In this case, Amazon, we have a bullish pattern in growth, which is the one we see here. And that's actually because expectations are increasing, but they're actually not at sort of crazy levels, right? Technicals are sort of extended, price level is extended, similar to Tesla. Dividend yields are sort of middle of the road for Amazon, but the one actionable pattern that exists is really in this analyst consensus within the growth category. But again, you can see overlaid on the price chart what's happening to Amazon and you know, where Toggle has had a couple of bullish patterns over the last few weeks. Back to the feed. As I said, there are a number of ways that you can utilize it. So one of the favorites for almost everyone is hot topic is sort of trending. So what is everyone else looking at, right? This pattern in Walker and Dunlop. We've had a number of bullish patterns in Bitcoin, United Airlines seasonality, Alphabet, right? A number of patterns that a lot of people have been looking at. It might be interesting for you to take a look at, because the sort of wisdom of the crowds is finding these articles interesting. When you come in and set up your account, within settings, you can set up a watch list, you can connect your portfolio, as I mentioned, and this view of feed is actually really just giving you all of the dimensions of your watch list. And then the search bar allows you to really open up that vast universe where you could say, hey, you know what, I'm interested in currencies. I want to see, what has Toggle found in currencies lately? Pattern in Great British Pound versus the Hungarian forint, similar against Romania, right? Some currency futures, and you can do things like that. You could instead search by, you know what, I'm interested in semiconductors. So I want to find all of the things Toggle has found in semiconductors, and start diving in from there. You could say, you know what, I just want to know what bullish patterns has Toggle found of late, or what bearish patterns has Toggle found of late. Similarly, we talked about the sort of the star rankings. You could say, you know what, I want to know what are the 7-star patterns that Toggle has found recently. We can walk through we can walk through another here. So in this case, the Winpack, it's a Canadian company, or Cummins Diesel, right? Analyst expectations increased for book value per sales forward growth. So expectations of what book value per sales is going to be over the next 12 months has been increasing. And typically that's led a rally in Cummins. Now, as I said, this is according to the star rankings, this is 7 stars. And so what that means, you can see, happens with relative frequency, right? It's happened across several business cycles, both before 2008, obviously the big financial crisis, and afterwards. So you get a better sense of, has this been robust through cycles? Actually, looking further along, something we didn't cover earlier is that Toggle actually does a full in-sample, out-of-sample backtest. And so what does that mean? That means that after the first few times that Toggle sees, okay, analysts have been revising book value per sales, book value per share, after the first few times when you've seen those revisions, it would estimate, okay, given what I've seen so far, what do I expect to happen this 6th time I see it? And then it'll keep track, was that accurate? The 7th time I see it, what would I expect given that prior data and what happens afterward? So that's referred to as a walk forward back test. The importance of that is that you're not biasing the results based off of information you have now that you wouldn't have had at the time. And so what these plots show are, in this top right chart, it'll show you the expected return over a given period and what actually realized. So we can see a number of times there were expected returns greater than 20%, and we saw returns, between sort of 10 and 20%. Several times that, there were expected returns of sort of just under 20%. We had returns of 20% and higher, and actually several times when we had, expected returns of between 5 and 10%, you actually lost money when the prediction was incorrect, and the pattern would have lost money. But overall, obviously, having everything in that top right quadrant means that generally, even without biasing, given the forward information, when you've had a sort of bullish pattern, that bullish pattern has come to fruition. You can also see, how does the distribution of returns for Cummins change over these periods versus all other 3 to 6 month periods. And so this is only when you've seen that pattern of analyst revisions versus all other 3 to 6 month periods over the entire history of Cummins. So obviously a meaningful shift to the right, much lower left tail than the distribution typically has over those sort of periods. And then the final bit is sort of showing you if you were to trade this blindly. So this was the only piece of information that you were to utilize in looking at trading Cummins. What would that have looked like, right? And sort of how smooth would that profit and loss look like over time? And obviously relatively smooth until this sort of last period of volatility that we've had. And the cool thing is that now with the updates to the overview widget, you can see that in context. So not only can we pull up Cummins and see that article we just had in those metric revisions, but we can actually see when have we had this. And so it's actually been triggering sort of since the beginning of the month. August 6th was the first time we saw it, where it said, hey, the Cummins might go up above 200 and even inch over to 220. And in fact, obviously, we've seen a meaningful increase in price since that first triggering of that consensus metric. Now, the final piece of Toggle Pro is the analytics suite. And so what this allows you to do is, instead of having the system look at stuff on your behalf, you can originate analysis yourself. So you could say, that same
SPX.
Yeah, so sorry, the internet here is a little bit slow, but so pulling up that same asset Cummins, you can actually start to do the analysis yourself. So you could say, hey, we had this up move recently. When have we seen a move like that before, and what has happened afterward? Or we can even do things like, hey, this visual pattern of having this sort of trough and then a rally afterward, have we seen that in Cummins before? I want to look at the visual pattern that I'm looking at. You can click confirm, and then the system will go back and say, okay, when have we seen this before and what does it look like? So if we click to max, we can see, hey, you've seen that sort of down pattern followed by an up pattern a number of times. We saw it mid-2000s a couple of times, 2006, 2007, 2010, and then sort of most recently 2016. But it actually doesn't tell us very much. After seeing a pattern like that, the name has sort of generally drifted down a little bit over the next sort of 1 month or so, and then has been sort of sideways to upward biased, but nothing really too marked in terms of what that looks like, or being able to determine, oh, this is definitely going up, or this is definitely going down, or anything of that sort. But the cool thing is that you can just to pull up SPX for you, you can start to do multiple things at once. So you could say, you know what, I want to know when we've seen. Sorry, we've just updated a few things. It can be a little hard to see. When I've seen this upward move in the Russell 2000, as we've seen, right, which has rallied even more than the S&P 500. What has the S&P 500 typically done? And we can see actually that's only happened once before, right? And so we don't have a meaningful sample from which to look at in terms of looking at that history. But the S&P was sort of down to sideways, but given it was only one period, really it's just plotting that prior period. But especially with respect to some of the single name stuff, Dodge uses Cummins engines. And so you could say, you know what, I want to know if I were to pull up Fiat Chrysler, how has that stock price sort of changed, right? Obviously, Fiat has generally been down since the sort of coronavirus panic and then rally, whereas Cummins is certainly at a new high, whereas obviously Chrysler has come the other way, right? Is there anything we can glean from that? So typically when Cummins has had a rally like that, what has typically happened to Fiat, and is there anything that we can glean from that information? And actually, doesn't generally look so good for Fiat, that even though they really haven't recovered their share price, given what one of their major suppliers is doing, likely it's not going to help things there. But and Juan and I were talking about this at the beginning. The cool thing is with the analytics suite is that actually the entirety of everything that Toggle has, all of the data, is included in the analytics suite. So in case you want to look at inflation or PEs or analyst expectations, it's all there and available to use. And so we're sort of constantly adding stuff, constantly changing things, trying to make it clearer. You guys have been certainly a huge part of that in helping test and ask questions and everything else. And so I know I've gone through a sort of really quick run through to a certain extent. Happy to dive in, answer questions. Juan, I don't know if you have any questions specifically you wanted to start with, or anything you think I should dive into more, given obviously you're pretty familiar with the platform.
Actually, what you were showing, the new release, I was looking at it yesterday, and I was a little bit. I have a few questions. If we can go and see like any ticker for you were looking at Amazon or whatever. Yeah.
Everyone's favorite Tesla.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look at it. So it says growth, and it says 66%.
Yes. So, great question. And so as we're iteratively adding and sort of tweaking things, but the perfect can be the enemy of the good. So we figured get it out there, try and explain it as people have questions, and iterate further. So what Toggle is doing is it's contextualizing in a percentile framework the current metrics versus a 5-year history. And so for each of the sort of themes, there are a number of metrics that play into it. So for example, something like momentum, right? It's not just looking at 1 month momentum. It's looking at 1 week momentum and 1 month momentum and 3 month momentum and 6 month momentum and 12 month momentum. And it's looking at a bunch of different dimensions, what the number is as on its own, as well as how those numbers have changed. Have they been persistently positive, persistently negative, things like that. And it's utilizing all of that information to say, giving it an aggregate score across all of those different momentum metrics, how does the current momentum look versus the last 5 years? And so in this case, Tesla is at essentially the highest levels we've seen nearly in the last 5 years on a momentum basis. And on a price level basis, certainly, absolutely the highest price that we've seen over the last 5 years. And so the idea is to contextualize using a long enough history, sort of 5 years, without using full history, where you're likely capturing the current regime, maybe a little bit longer, but enough history to really give a sense of where do we currently stand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. So, for instance, you can see this chart and say, okay, the growth is not as high, for instance, relative to, I would say like 50% would be average, right?
Exactly, yes. So okay. 50% would be half the time over the last 5 years it's been higher than this, half the time it's been lower than this.
And then you see, okay, it has, the revisions have been 87% positive. It's overbought. It has strong momentum. Technical analysis is showing strong patterns. The valuation is expensive, like relative valuations, and it's the price level is too high, and the yield level is low. So you can combine all these and say, okay, the growth is not supporting maybe that expensive the price, and it's probably more technical than fundamental.
Yes, and I think one of the really cool things is that, and we'll pull up a different name, is that these will change if there are patterns that have recently occurred that match any of the categories. So in this case, you're not only learning, oh, momentum's really high for Tesla, but also that Toggle can't tell you anything about that. Yes, momentum's really strong, but we actually can't tell you whether or not that's historically been a bullish pattern, been a bullish signal for Tesla or been a bearish signal for Tesla. It's just a fact. Whereas, going back to I think it was Amazon that we were looking at before, where the results were a little bit more mixed. Sorry, where yes, technicals are really high, entry point is high, momentum is really strong, price level is really high, but actually the current level of growth is not so high for Amazon at 42, but the current level is such that actually that's bullish for the name, where typically I'll open it in a new tab, where this level of in this case, sorry, sales forward growth and book value per share, right? So those two metrics together are actually signaling, hey, we've seen this before in sort of 2008 and really the end of 2007 as well. In Amazon, and both of the times when growth was in this configuration, not super low, not super high, just sort of slightly middle of the road, but the configuration of those two fundamentals are actually signaling that there might be still more room to run in Amazon, right? And since that was published the first time and then even the second time, obviously the name has been sort of increasing in price.
I think I would like to see Apple because we've been talking a little bit about it in our previous webinars.
Sure. So people revising downward, growth on the strong end, but we haven't had any patterns in Apple in a very long time. So it's really just, we originally called this information sort of good to know, right? Here's some information that's good to know about Apple, but it's not actionable, right? There's nothing that we can tell you whether or not it's bullish, bearish, anything else, but price is really high, momentum's really strong, entry point is overbought. Dividends are really low for Amazon, sorry, for Apple, in this case, 0. Valuations are actually sort of middle of the road, surprisingly, right? Even with this sort of really strong momentum and really high price level, valuations actually aren't crazy for Amazon, right? Really middle of the road, and people are sort of revising downward.
Cool. I just want to say I love your platform, guys. It's amazing, and everyone here who's a Peeptrade user, you should definitely jump on this, start looking at it. I look at it quite often, and thanks so much. It's great to have a partnership with you guys. It's overwhelming, and we have a couple of questions for you,
Sure.
RJ.
Let me stop share.
Manuel says, is Toggle just working with USA's market?
Great question. So the answer is no. We cover, as I said, about 13,000 assets globally. So we have, I think, about 2,000 ETFs in the US, about 4,000 single names. We cover all of Canada, UK, Europe, and some Korean names as well. On the single name front, global indexes, commodities, currencies, fixed income, right? It's sort of all there. All of us come from a macro background, so we really started with all of the big macro stuff, and then we've been adding in a lot more single name coverage since then. The second question is about smart beta momentum. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Marco, but the momentum is looked at on a sort of single asset basis. So we're not sort of doing a vol adjustment versus a benchmark, or beta adjusting versus a benchmark, or anything else. There are a number of things that we plan to do to look at both sort of peer relative value, where you might say, instead of just looking at Apple, I want to look at Apple divided by XLK, right? And I want to look at at Apple versus the tech benchmark or something like that. And so there are a number of things that we will be doing there, but those aren't typically happening. It's all just looking at single asset. But there are cross asset patterns that you'll run into, and so. In thinking about the process Toggle uses to sort of generate all of these insights, we use a knowledge graph to sort of layer data to assets. And so when you think about something like U.S. Treasury volatility, right? It's a highly systemic thing that percolates through to many assets in the market. And so when you have something interesting there, right, you're going to test that against many assets. Whereas something like McDonald's same-store sales, you're likely only going to test against McDonald's and maybe Yum Brands, right? It's a sort of localized competitor. But sorry, long way around to say I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean by the smart beta momentum, but we're not doing any sort of index relative at this point.
We have Manuel saying thanks.
Thank you. No, thank you. Seriously though, thank you, Manuel, and thank you, Juan. I really do mean, we only get better with people using it and feedback, and your feedback is really invaluable. There are buttons all through the platform that say, give us feedback anytime you have a question, you don't understand something, you think something's wrong. Never hesitate to reach out, because we love all forms, good and bad, though sometimes just tell us that you like us, because it can be a little disheartening otherwise with only bad feedback. But no, really, thank you guys.
There's another one in Facebook. Is let me tell you the name. So Chris Velasquez says, how I update my Toggle account to Pro. I subscribed a month ago when I saw another Facebook Live in Peeptrade Academy, but my account is standard.
Of course. If you send me an email to rj@toggle.ai, it's just the 2 letters. I've just put it into the chat in the Zoom. Feel free to put it into the Facebook Live chat if that exists. Shoot me an email saying, hey, I'm from Peeptrade. I'd love to have my account upgraded, and I'll make sure that everyone is on Toggle Pro. The main difference at this point is that Toggle Pro has the analytics suite, which Copilot does not.
Thank you very much, and always great to see the new continuous development that you've been doing. It's been 3 or 4 months, and I always seen 2 or 3 major releases.
We try. I think, as I said, it's all driven by feedback. Some of the stuff is stuff that I want to build, or some of my team, some of the team wants to build. But really a lot of what we do is because you guys tell us, hey, I saw this article, I have no idea what this means. I have no idea what this says. Or, hey, I've searched for Tesla, but I just want to make sure I'm seeing everything, right? And all of those things are really what give us the ideas of how do we make this better? How do we communicate information more clearly? And really it's invaluable.
Well, thanks so much again, RJ. A pleasure. And if you haven't signed up, make sure you're missing out. Right?
Thanks, Juan. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Gracias a todos los que estuvieron aquí. Como vieron, pues es una herramienta bastante robusta. Es una herramienta más. A mí me gusta revisarla. Tiene muchos datos que son muchas veces contraintuitivos, porque tenemos cierto sesgo nosotros los humanos hacia el último dato que escuchamos, y entonces esto nos da un panorama bastante más amplio. Así es que los que estén por acá y no sean de Peeptrade, les sugerimos suscribirse en peeptrade.com. Una vez que lo hayan hecho, pueden mandarle un correo a RJ, que como está ahí en el chat, y decirle que son usuarios de Peeptrade, y les va a dar la plataforma Pro. Esta es una plataforma no es para clientes normales, es para clientes institucionales, pero pues por ser parte de Peeptrade, aquí nos lo dan de manera gratuita. Espero que tengan un buen día. Nos vemos mañana a las 10 y a las 11 de la mañana. Los que han tenido problemas para los cursos y el concurso, estoy por mandar un correo. Hubo algunas tarjetas que no estaban funcionando desde un banco o un par de bancos en específico. Ya cambiamos el proveedor, así es que no deberíamos de tener ningún problema. Así es que esperen un correo en los próximos minutos, y gracias a todos por su paciencia y una disculpa si los hemos hecho esperar. Tenemos una sorpresa también por haber sido pacientes con nosotros. Así es que tengan un buen día, y nos vemos mañana. Gracias a todos.